Hi there, good people. This is Shauna Johnson and World War III ideologies. So as you know, there was a dumpster fire worth of news regarding Donald Trump and the Coup Caucus. Yes, I like to call them New Coup Caucus. I think it sounds hilarious. I like it. Anyway, there was a dumpster fire worth of news about them over the weekend, and I started to, write up what I had learned. But I got stuck in the charging documents that were dropped on Stewart Rhodes. And I think that's because Bad Company of Twitter also suggested that the Oath Keeper Jessica Watkins is a great candidate for who is the DC bomber, or the attempted bomber, I should say. And so let's go ahead and just dive into how I put this all together and why I think that Bad Company is probably right. So if you don't know, Stewart Rhodes, who is the leader of the Oath Keeper, he now says that he wants to testify publicly for Treason Day January 6th committee. Now, they're not going to let that happen. He is not going to be permitted to give his first testimony in public because I'm sure, like everyone else, they are worried that he will turn it into a circus. And Stewart Rhodes is not the brightest star in the sky, and he doesn't realize that he's going to be the one to get in the most trouble, as he is the leader, if you will, for the army for Trump, or at least the combative side, the insurrectionist side of the army for Trump. And he doesn't realize that these people are all going to leave him holding the bag. And so he's still on their team. He hasn't flipped, and the January 6th Treason Day Committee knows it. That's why they have them first testify in private in front of the January 6th committee so that they can know what they say, that they're going to say, what they're testifying to. And then when they get into the public side of the testimony, the January 6th Treason Day Committee can be like, well, that's not what you said earlier. And they can just kind of shut them up and then just play all the video from the testimony that they received at an earlier date in private that they obviously filmed. So anyway, that's where Stewart Rhodes is. But why is he all of a sudden saying, yeah, I do want to testify publicly? Now, let's just pretend for a second that he's being honest. If he's being honest, the reason why he's all of a sudden what changed his mind to want to testify is that his lawyer had to have had a look at his charging documents, which I'm going to go over, and then thought about what the previous testimony had been that were also offered up by all the wannabe soldiers on the ship of losers who transformed into a bunch of rats jumping ship to save their own lives rather than their country, by the way. I'm good. However they want to do it, I don't care. I don't care. Just get this guy where he belongs, and it's not in the free world. So anyway, let's get back to the charging documents. The first thing that stands out, Merrick Garland. Merrick Garland, who everybody gives junk to because honestly, I don't think that they understand how the Department of Justice, how the judicial branch works here in the United States. So Merrick Garland, who's an excellent attorney general of the great United States of America, has evidence, according to, again, Stewart Rhodes' charging documents, that somebody, we don't know who, I'm guessing it's probably Roger Stone, but somebody conspired with the Oath Keepers, providing instructions to make a bomb and a death list, or what I like to call the assassination roster, with the names of Georgia election officials. So one has to wonder, who were the Georgia election officials that were in D.C. at the time of Treason Day? I'm going to guess probably Georgia's Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, who is going to testify in front of the Fulton County grand jury. Or how about Gabriel Sterling, who is testifying for the DA in Fulton County and will arguably testify on behalf of Dominion voting systems? I'm guessing those two were marked men. And Garland has evidence that another guy, Jeremy Brown, who we're going to really get into in a bit, brought explosives to D.C., and he, along with Kelly Meigs, who in all honesty I haven't researched yet, but I will. You know your girl. You know I will. So he, along with Kelly Meigs and Stewart Rhodes, always planned on fighting the military of the United States of America and not Antifa as we previously thought. Their plan was to attack sometime between January 6th and January 20th. And perhaps that's why they were okay with going home when Donald Trump said that the battle was over and he loved his army for Trump and what they accomplished that day. He knew that they weren't necessarily expecting to win that battle on the 6th, that they had reserved their rooms through at least the 10th. And so if they didn't win the big battle on the 6th, then they would just have another battle later that they could win. And that's also obviously why the National Guard was stationed in the Capitol through the inaugurations. And that's why the gates, if you will, were up around Capitol Hill through the inauguration as well. And I want to point out that the Republicans and the MAGA Nat Cons Nat Cs, who knew all about this plan, mind you, knew that they had these rooms reserved until at least the 20th. They all knew this. And remember, they were yelling and screaming because how dare we make the National Guard sleep on the floor in Capitol Hill, when in reality, they were mad because the National Guard was protecting the United States of America from their army for Trump that they had stationed throughout D.C. But wait, it doesn't stop there, y'all. We are just getting started. There was another person who attended Treason Day with the Three Stooges, and her name is Jessica Watkins. Now, I hadn't really heard of her or paid much attention to her, but when Bad Company on Twitter mentioned her name and his reasoning of why she's a candidate for this traitorous treason, I had to do some research because I cannot name a time when he's been wrong. Again, if you're not following him, please do and read his pinned post. Read it. You got to do it. So Bad Company led me straight to the evidence that we should consider, especially since she's mentioned in the charging documents of Stewart Rhodes. So let's go ahead and review real quick what the public opinion of the DC bomber is first. The DC bomber, if you remember, had a masculine gait for a woman while walking. So you're like, maybe it's a guy, right? But then she presented feminine qualities while seating. It was a combination of behaviors that's difficult for many to wrap our heads around, as the first thing that comes to mind when one says man or woman is the gender assigned at birth, without a question in our minds that that person maintains their birth gender. I mean, in all honesty, we know so little about the transgender people that I don't even know if I'm using the correct verbiage, to be honest. Our lack of understanding transgender people and their need to hide so that they aren't beat up by a bunch of insecure boys who didn't receive the love they deserved from their parents. Those groomed in the art of strategy and propaganda would see the advantages of using a trans woman to throw people off. So let's get back to Jessica Watkins, who was named in the charging documents, let me remind you, of Stewart Rhodes. Jessica Watkins is a veteran who was known by her dead name as she served in the military in her birth gender, which is male. That could easily explain why the DC bomber had a masculine gait, but presented feminine traits of taking up less space while she was seated. The traitor also had to have enough strength to carry the bombs for long distances. I'm not sure how much the bombs weighed, but if a woman planted those bombs, it would most certainly have to have been green, or a woman who used testosterone to build her muscles early on in life. With that in mind, Watkins seems like a great fit. But wait, there's more. Watkins was also involved in the early planning stages that took place in September. Thing is, she wasn't willing to attend the Treason Day rally until it was confirmed that Donald would definitely use the Insurrection Act to declare martial law in order to make sure the coup succeeded. After all, when a coup fails, those who plotted it are thrown in jail with a life sentence. It wasn't until December that she finally said she was on board. So for 3 months, she listened to their strategy, but refused to commit until she had enough evidence they would succeed and she wouldn't wind up in jail. So what did she learn in December that gave her the confidence to take on this suicide mission? If you remember, before December, she wasn't the only one who had yet to sign on to Treason Day. The events on Treason Day originally scheduled just a few small speakers who wouldn't draw an overwhelming crowd as was needed for a coup attempt. And then the rally on December 12th happened in D.C. Do you remember that one? That was the rally the Proud Boys attended en masse wearing their yellow-bellied bee uniforms in D.C. It was at that rally they went around terrorizing liberals and then rioted a little bit in the evening hours. Enrico Tarrio ripped down a Black Lives Matter flag off a church in order to burn what he had stolen. It was for that crime, that he was arrested when he arrived in D.C. for Treason Day rally. I have to just point out real quick that this was very convenient for the guy who was supposed to lead the army for Trump to battle the next day. I mean, how convenient that he was able to pass the job right over to Stewart Rhodes, leader of the Oath Keepers, in a garage before the first battle of the Civil War 2.0. I honestly would be flabbergasted if Enrico Tarrio isn't an undercover agent who managed to get to the top of the Proud Boys. I truly don't. I would be incredibly surprised if that isn't what he is. Anyway, after the rioting on December 12th, during which the police showed their allegiance to Team Bad Guy by refusing to arrest the terrorists, the tide began to change. To those paying attention like me, it started looking as they used that riot to prove to Donald and the rest of the Nat-C movement that they could be counted on to show up, stand by, and then attack. After the higher-ups saw they really did have a willing army that included veterans who had been trained in tactical procedures, they got together on the 15th of December in order to plan their attack against Congress, scheduled to begin on January 9th. Yes, the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers had already said they would attend the Treason Day rally long before December 12th, even reserving rooms at the hotel where they always stay when in D.C. However, we know that on December 15th, the higher-ups gained confidence in their plan as they significantly upgraded who would speak before the rally and the attack against the USA. The speakers went from obscure names one might know to people like Mo Brooks, Ted Cruz, and the headliner, Donald Trump himself. There is only one reason for this change. Loyalty had been proven, and now they needed to get a huge crowd to show up at the Capitol. They needed the numbers to help camouflage their Confederate soldiers. Absolutely. But more importantly, they needed a bunch of felons and riled up Americans who would simply follow their lead and help them attack the Capitol. It was their thought that the protesters and even some cops would be swept up into the moment and join them as they hunted down their prey, the American government. In fact, once I saw what was going on, I went from encouraging my followers on my now banned account, Team Good Guy, to attend a counter-protest in D.C., to begging them that they stay away. I knew the addition of the worshipped faces of the MAGA Nat-C movement, Cruz, Hawley, Donald, etc., would greatly increase attendance, and the last thing we needed was to watch a bunch of Nazi beat up a bunch of peaceful protesters on the left and then manipulate the video footage to make it seem like Antifa was at fault and not the Nazi. I went from show up to stay away and let the police fight the Nazi. I naively thought Donald and the Nat Cons wouldn't be willing to sacrifice any police who stayed true to our country instead of exhibiting loyalty to him. I wasn't the only one who saw what was coming. At the last moment, the hotel, yes, the hotel the Proud Boys routinely used, decided to cancel all of their reservations and close down the hotel for 3 days for their safety. Just imagine how expensive that is for the hotel to close for 3 days. That's tens of thousands of dollars, I'm assuming. Now, they could have been talking about COVID when they talked about closing for the safety, but I didn't see it that way. I think they were afraid of the destruction that they expected the Proud Boys to cause and wanted no part of it. So back to Jessica Watkins, the candidate for the D.C. bomber, who was also mentioned in the charging documents of Stewart Rhodes. She signed onto attending Treason Day around December 15th, as she had seen enough to believe that they had a good chance of succeeding in throwing over the government of the United States. That is some narcissistic, egotistical thinking, and I'm going to go over that when we talk about Eric Prince in another post, but let's continue with this shit show. The DC bomber never tugged at it nor showed any discomfort, making it likely wearing a vest is something they do often. Another thing I found odd about the DC bomber, they didn't appear concerned that what they carried could explode, killing them if they weren't gentle enough. That means the DC bomber finds no discomfort carrying a bomb, and they most likely needed to activate it for it to work. That points to someone who is very comfortable and can do a job like this while under immense pressure. This all points to Jessica Watkins and away from Green. Maybe you think a veteran isn't cause to be sent on this mission, as it doesn't guarantee experience with bombs. In Jessica Watkins' case, when the government searched her home, however, they found instructions on how to make a bomb. Other things that were found in her home showing that she at least was very familiar with explosives. That said, if she had directions lying around at her home, maybe she wasn't that familiar with bombs all that much, especially considering her age, as one would think by 38 she would have mastered that skill by now and didn't need the directions. Maybe that's why she sat down on the bench. Maybe she was reviewing the instructions on how to activate the bomb. Maybe that's also why it didn't go off, although I do trust our team enough to think they probably deactivated it and left it there to see if the person would come back, but the government won't ever admit to that. But that's what I think probably happened. So my guess, though, is that Jessica Watkins was a patsy, an easy mark that they talked into taking this huge risk. I think Jeremy Brown, one of the guys leading this small cell of 4 soldiers who consider themselves the commanders of the elite forces, brought the bomb to D.C. for Watkins to activate and possibly assassinate various leaders of the American government, helping out the Confederacy. Jeremy Brown didn't have a struggling business like Jessica Watkins did. And I'm betting growing up a white male in our society more likely gave him the intelligence and the self-esteem, quite honestly, not to take that risk. He also is accused of transporting explosives to D.C. on Treason Day in the charging documents of Stewart Rhodes. And there were many, many grenades and other unregulated Second Amendment stuff littering his home when the feds executed their warrants. I am guessing that the feds have known this since February when Jessica Watkins told everything. Oh, you didn't know that Jessica Watkins probably flipped back in February of 2021? Well, let me tell you about that. See, I think that she gave up the entire plan, including being the DC bomber. If I was someone who made bets, that's what I would bet. And I realized this as I was writing. It makes sense and could work for the plot of a novel that I'm working on, so let's just go ahead and walk through this together. When Watkins went to court and heard all the evidence against her, realizing she had been used and manipulated once again by the monsters of society, she broke down and did what nobody expected in court. Without a deal, again, without a deal, giving her immunity, knowing that she would be prosecuted, she blurted out that she denounced the Oath Keepers and was ending her chapter of the Oath Keepers that she had recruited to attack the United States. Furthermore, she expressed her embarrassment. Her words were, "I am embarrassed that I am standing here today," because I think at that moment she realized that she had been easily manipulated into committing treason. She really had felt that she was helping her country and had obviously expected their plot to take over the world would work. It's often the costliest of errors that one realizes the error of their ways and ideology. That moment, when she stood up in court and just dropped that onto everyone, my assumption is a very lengthy debriefing began in a skiff somewhere. I also assume that she was a cooperative witness and became the reason so many witnesses, over 1,000 if memory serves, chose to come forward and reveal what they knew in exchange for probation or something, for an unsealed indictment or something lawyerly like that. Perhaps this is why the messaging against trans people has amped up the past few months. They got word that Jessica Watkins is caught and perhaps flipped. This is why she was chosen and pressured into this role for, quote, love of country. Her being trans would give the MAGA fools cause to believe she was a plant by the left. Man, my mind is racing as I enter the minds of these monsters who used the difficult life Jessica Watkins probably had and still does, feeling alone and bullied her entire lifetime as a trans woman, someone who, quote, didn't fit in. What a double win for the MAGA strategists. Most likely the person who failed in a mass assassination attempt using 2 bombs would squeal when squeezed. There was never, ever a 0% chance that the person in that critical role wouldn't rat everyone out. So get the trans woman, who is probably very altruistic and radicalized by years of bullying, who will throw everyone off and then can be outed as a, quote, obvious liberal, to take the biggest risks, which she wasn't even willing to take until December after assurances Donald would use the Insurrection Act to declare martial law after those bombs exploded. My guess is the secret Nazi groups we don't know about suggested the Freedom Fourth mass shooter who went after a liberal Jewish neighborhood after first casing a synagogue to dress in women's clothes to escape for this very reason. I can't believe this was a coincidence with perfect timing. I can't. I don't. Until they announce who the DC bomber is, and they know. Nobody can convince me otherwise. These weren't the roles these Stooges plays. You got your patsy, definitely suggested by Roger Stone, who had gotten to know his soldiers by then, as he always does. Jessica Watkins, set to take the biggest fall while offering the minuscule amount of doubt they needed. James is the explosives guy, taking all the risk of bringing them to DC because being a tough guy and the only one possible could do this is him. And he probably patted himself on the back. I'm sure of it. And he had gotten out of placing the bomb by pressuring their favorite person they often soft bully, as I'm going to call it. They soft bullied Jessica into doing this. Stewart Rhodes was the best person to set up for the fall for the violent part of the insurrection and coup, and too narcissistic and ignorant, which is always a fatal combination, to roll on everyone later, never realizing this was their plan the entire time. Let him serve a bunch of time due to the mountain of electronic communication they have, thinking he's still doing something for his country. The Oath Groupers are a hated group in the USA anyway. Heck, they're considered a terrorist group by many around the globe. Again, this gives them a villain nobody will mind being arrested, who is too dumb not to save himself and his country instead of being the patsy that he is now and always has been. He also provides plausible deniability for Donald because how disgusting the Oath Keepers are gives some in his base the doubt that Donald would partner with such deplorable people, even though he made being deplorable cool, by the way. Meanwhile, the Army for Trump Stooge Squad thought that they would go down in history books standing on the right side and left side of their hero, Donald Trump, while he gives his triumphant speech denouncing the election as fraudulent, which was just proven by the terrorist event that happened at the Rhino and DC buildings. That was what his speech was going to be about, hands down. And let us not forget that he expected to give that speech on the steps of the Capitol. and then lead his people into where the votes were being counted. Or at the very least, give the speech about the bombs and the need to protect democracy and declaring martial law due to the huge act of sabotage or some other BS they had ready to shovel. Can you see now why Donald Trump was so angry in the car that he attacked an agent, a Secret Service agent, and then later threw his plate of ketchup at the wall? Donald Trump knew without a shadow of a doubt that his army for Trump, including his special stooges, had taken their places and he had not. Perhaps that is why Donald wanted the mags that detected weapons removed. He wanted to walk amongst the crowd like some kind of messiah to the Capitol, where he would be met by his elite forces who would stand shoulder to shoulder with him and fight whatever enemy came their way, including those working with the Secret Service and Capitol Police. He never wanted to get into the car in the first place. But they had already started marching to the Capitol. And so he said, you know what, I'll go ahead and get into the car so I can meet them at a right time, right? Because he was already running late because the explosion didn't go off. Had he been just a bit more of a fit man, maybe he would have walked, maybe he would have ran. And had he, this story probably would have ended much differently. So let's thank Donald Trump for his fatal flaw of gluttony. And join me back here when I give my analysis of the treason trial testimony that we're going to get today. Again, thank you so much for your support, and please help me get out the word so that people know what's going on and we can battle the propaganda BS that we're seeing come out of Fox News and others. Till tomorrow.